But there is a point in time where like papal infallibility starts to develop, and then when the Pope chooses the emperor. So Charlemagne is crowned the Holy Roman Emperor by the Pope. I think it's the year 800. Give it a goog. And that's when I would argue.
I love you.
That's
dude.
when it starts.
Great.
Well, fact check me. I can't remember the date.
Every once in a while, the Canadian bursts out of you.
That's Canadian.
Give it a goog.
Give it a goog. Was it 800?
You got it.
So yeah, Pope Leo, another Pope Leo,
Yes,
the third. He crowns Charlemagne the emperor. Before that, the emperor kind of had influence who the Pope was, and this is where you get this like subversion, and that's where I personally would say the Roman Catholic big R big C church starts. That's controversial. Roman Catholics don't like it that I say that, but that's when you start to get this idea of a papal primacy and the magisterium as this concrete body.
So that's kind of my bread and butter, right? The magisterium. When did the question of papal infallibility begin? When did the magisterium begin? Did this really officially start in the year 800? He says he knows Catholics don't like this, but this is his theory. It's not an issue that Catholics don't like this. The problem is it's not an issue of liking. The problem is it just goes against the facts. That's all. Let me give an analogy that's maybe a little bit more fitting to where he's coming from. It would be like saying, you know what? I know Christians don't like this, but the fact is the New Testament was written in the 5th century. Wes Huff knows enough about textual criticism, about the manuscripts, about the transmission of the New Testament, about church history. He knows enough to know, yeah, no, that's not true. And he knows enough about the codices and the papyri, and he can give you examples of a codex or a papyrus that predates the 5th century. So you can already say it's not an issue of not liking that claim. It's just that it's so contrary to the evidence and facts that it's not a respectable opinion. Obviously, you have the solemn definition of this at Vatican I, but it's not coming out of nowhere. What are some of the things that they're referencing? Well, of course, they're referencing the Sixth Ecumenical Council, which we've covered so many times. I'm so embarrassed to even show it to y'all again. I'm so embarrassed because I've had to show it to y'all at least once a week for like 4 years now. I do, again, cover it in my book, Answering Orthodoxy, for whatever that's worth, and numerous videos here. But the Sixth Ecumenical Council, how that works with the situation with Honorius is fascinating. We've explored that many times here. But the Sixth Ecumenical Council accepts papal infallibility in seed form. I say in seed form just because it's not as explicit and laid out as you have at Vatican I, but the substance of the idea is certainly there. So you can see this, of course, in Agatho's letter read to the council, read out loud, which all the council then explicitly accepts. And why is he even telling this to the council? Because he's saying, hey, I'm settling this question on whether Jesus has one or two wills. I'm settling this question, and I can settle that question because Rome has never been wrong and Rome will never be wrong because Jesus promised that Rome will never be wrong. This is 680 to 681, the Sixth Ecumenical Council. That's obviously 120 years prior to Charlemagne in 800. And he made the claim even broader, not just papal infallibility. He's saying the concept of a structured magisterium, he wants to say, began in 800. This is why I'm saying it's not a respectable theory, because already you have papal infallibility being asserted 120 years prior to that. If you have that, you certainly have a structured magisterium. And by the way, there's numerous other instances that I can point you to showing a structured magisterium. And I can show you this from the 2nd century on up to 800 AD. And very, very clear, numerous instances. We're talking thousands of instances of papal magisterial authority being exercised, and many instances where the East is accepting it. Talking about a structured magisterium here. Rome is claiming papal supremacy, not even just a primacy, but a supremacy, the ability to intervene in the affairs of Eastern dioceses. Rome is not only claiming it, it actually exercised it. Most Orthodox don't know this. There are several instances around the time of the Sixth Ecumenical Council that the Pope is deposing bishops in the East and then installing new bishops in the East. He's deposing them. He's going in. not like personally, he sends representatives to do it, but by his own authority, he's removing people from ministry and then putting new bishops in there who aren't heretics. That's intervening in the affairs of another diocese. That's not merely an honorific first among equals. That is what Vatican I teaches, where he has immediate ordinary jurisdiction. There it is. Vatican I is not out of nowhere. Not only can you find that teaching at Nicaea II, you can see it exercised before Nicaea II. If that's not the magisterium, what is the magisterium? What do you mean by the magisterium? It's going to be the teaching authority of the Pope and the College of Bishops. Okay. College of Bishops, that's easy. You got bishops in their own dioceses, all collectively speaking together in numerous cases, but then more importantly, manifesting in ecumenical councils. There goes the one part of a magisterium, ecumenical councils. Okay, you got plenty of them before 800. In fact, you got 7 of them before 800. Okay, there's one half of your magisterium. What's the other half? The papal organ, right? The papacy. Okay, you got popes exercising immediate jurisdiction before 800. You got popes asserting papal supremacy before 800. You got popes asserting papal indefectibility before then. You got numerous instances of this kind of teaching authority at all of the ecumenical councils. Now, if you mean like magisterium, the Roman Curia or something like that, that's not the magisterium. So what does he mean in 800? This is when it came about. It's just flat on its face. If you know anything about church history, this is not true. So I do have to question his knowledge of church history, which it's totally fine to be ignorant of. That's fine. That's fine. We all got areas we got to study and learn and know more about. The point is not being ignorant. The point is so stridently and confidently presenting misinformation to an audience that's not in a position to evaluate the claims. I pointed you to papal infallibility before 800. Rome claiming papal supremacy is well established again at Nicaea II. Some Eastern Orthodox try to contest the acts that bear that out, but the reality is the acts of Nicaea II are authentic, and the text that we have in Price about the acts are not interpolations, are not later additions, are not forgeries. They actually are the authentic versions. It was actually Photius, a century later, who took out some of the claims of Nicaea II to reduce papal authority because he was slamming papal authority in his own age, which still, oddly enough, he still accepted the core of the idea of papal primacy. You have the formula of Hormisdas in 514, somewhere around there, so about 300 years before 800. You have Rome saying that unless you're in communion with Rome, you're not in communion with the Catholic Church, and if you're cut off from communion with Rome, you're no longer in communion with the Catholic Church. You can't say that about any other see. You can't say that about any other episcopate or diocese or bishop. You can't say that. Rome was the only one who said, unless you're in communion with me, you're not in communion with the Catholic Church. And the Eastern bishops had to agree to that if they wanted to come back into communion, because at the time, the Eastern bishops were in schism and were heretics. And they did. They came back into communion. The schism between Rome and the Eastern churches was healed, and their condition was to accept various versions of the formula of Hormisdas. There were different versions of it, but all of them asserted the same ecclesiology. So, I mean, you got over 2,500 Eastern bishops accepting the formula of Hormisdas. If that's not a magisterium, and if that's not the papal claims, what is? And by the way, maybe also just to be as charitable as possible to Wes, because I would never want to straw man him or just anyone else. I always want to steel man people, give them the benefit of the doubt, strengthen their argument as much as possible before refuting it. Maybe what he meant in 800 was that the Pope didn't exercise temporal authority before then. I would point out that's not true. You do have popes exercising temporal authority before then. Certainly it's the first time that a pope appoints an emperor, but that doesn't mean that they didn't exercise temporal authority prior to then. But he made a greater claim. He didn't just say that the church exercising temporal authority began in 800. He didn't say that. He said the magisterium as this structured institution began then. That's just not true. There's no way to make sense of what he's saying. The only thing that you could say was new in 800 is the Pope crowned the Holy Roman Emperor an emperor, and that was it. Again, none of this adds up to prove what he mentioned there, but I did want to just attempt to steel man him, because I think some would attempt to say, well, he's just talking about the Pope exercising temporal authority, and that began in 800. No, he makes a greater claim than that. That's number one. And number two, even then, that's not true. Hey, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the like button, and if you want to support the channel, visit patreon.com/Reason and Theology.